Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here at the California Historical Radio Society's Radio Central. And periodically we do these talks and we have the professionals come in here and speak about radio the way it was, the way it is, and the way it may or may never be again. And we did a talk with 4 engineers back in about 2000, I think it was 4 or 5, back at our KRE building in Berkeley. That was the last time we did it. But now it's time to do it again. And like I said in the little blurb, you know, these are the people you never see, nor you never hear them. But if it wasn't for them, there'd be nothing on the air. So we're going to introduce you to Peter Finch, Hall of Fame member and KCBS, and he'll introduce the rest of these fine gentlemen.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, I was on the air at 6 a.m. this morning on KCBS, so if I start to nod off, that's why. Welcome, radio enthusiasts. It's a gathering of the tribe here. And yeah, like Steve was saying, these gentlemen up here are our unsung heroes in radio. You don't hear about them on the air so much, but I guarantee any control room you would go into would have a phone number on the wall, and that's the number you would dial at 2 in the morning when the station went off the air. And you'd be very apologetic waking them up, but they knew the drill. They had to be available on call 24/7, and they would get you back on the air as soon as they could. We've got some great, I'm sure we're going to hear some good stories today. Bill Ruck was asking me how many days we're going to be here. No, so, you know, if I have to interrupt them, I will, but I don't think I'm going to want to because we've got some great stories for you. I've got some good questions in my mind. I'm going to use my phone to read the bios, though, to introduce you to everybody here. And in no particular order, we'll start with Dan Ethan here. He began as a teenage volunteer at KPFA in Berkeley in the 1960s. By the way, interrupt me if I get your bios wrong, but this is what I've got here. His first paying radio job was at KLOK in San Jose, where he worked on air as well as behind the scenes. His other credits include memorable work at San Francisco's KNBR and KFRC before moving to KSRO in Santa Rosa, where he designed and built the station's studio in the Round. He continues to work with the Educational Media Foundation, the nonprofit Christian Media Ministry. So if you would please welcome Dan Ethan. Next up, it's my good friend Bill Ruck. We worked together for many years at KFOG. Bill was selected for induction by Chapter 40 of the Society of Broadcast Engineers, a native San Franciscan. Bill started his engineering career in 1972 at KUSF as chief engineer. He would go on to work at KJAZ, KALW, NPR West, and Susquehanna Broadcasting for 21 years as engineer manager for KFOG, KNBR, KSAN, and KTCT. Starting in 2007, Bill worked with the Maritime Radio Historical Society, maintaining historic radio equipment at former RCA Coastal Marine Station, KPH, now part of Point Reyes National Seashore. He attended UC Berkeley, U.S. Navy AV Class A School, and John A. O'Connell School in San Francisco. Bill is widely known in the broadcast engineering community, having written many helpful and informative articles for Radio World and other publications. Bill Ruck. Next up, we have Terry Lloyd. Terry started his radio career in 1956 after Army discharge at radio station KLOK, San Jose, becoming chief engineer in 1957. In 1968, he became chief engineer at KSFO In 1978, started consulting for stations in California as well as Central America. Terry Lloyd. Joined today by his lovely wife, and they met at KLOK, where she was employed. So it was a radio romance. Yeah, she deserves, he stayed with a radio guy for more than 60 years. You deserve a round of applause. And finally, we have Chuck Waltman. He's known for his lengthy tenure as chief engineer for Clear Channel stations in San Francisco, KMEL, KYLD, Wild, K101, KOSF, KISQ, KKSF, and KNEW. Within the broadcasting engineering community, he is widely respected for his quality of work. A native of Colorado, he began by working on air in 1968 when he was 16, then switched to engineering when he was still in his 20s. He won an award for Best Design and Construction of a radio facility at KIMN, Kim Radio in Denver, then moved to San Francisco in 1986. He helped design and build new studios for KSAN and KNEW. Waltman's other local call letters include KSFO, KYA, KSOL, and KABL. Between the four of them, we have a lot of call letters covered here today. Anyway, Chuck Waltman. Oh, and there's his list. Wow. Okay. So give it up for Chuck here. Yeah. And my first question, I guess it's for all of you, but Dan and Chuck in particular, in your bios, I just read that you started on air and at some point transitioned to being an engineer. So I guess the question for all of you, and you two coming from on air, why did you decide to become a radio engineer? What drew you in there? I guess, Terry, we'll start with you. Why did you want to be a radio engineer?
Well, when I was a kid, I listened to the radio a lot, and the interest grew. During World War II, I remember a lot of things that happened, like the war.
Yeah.
But
There was something that drew you in. Just was it the equipment, or the notion that you could hear somebody who was, miles away?
yeah, well, when I was a kid, I built a phono oscillator, and that got me started. And I don't know, it was always fascinating to me, radio. You used your imagination, and it's wonderful to be here today with all the rest of you guys. I don't remember all of you, but I do remember Mike Danberger, my most recent client. Going back to what, Dan? What year was?
80 years ago.
80 years ago.
I bet, yeah, you've known a lot of people over the years. I think,
So as you mentioned, I've worked a lot of places. Was a consultant. I worked with Altown quite a bit. And I presume a lot of people here remember Al.
Yes.
And
by the way, I will say that the rest of us are kids compared to you. You're 91 years old, right?
I'm afraid so.
No, it beats the alternative, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So Chuck, you started off on the air. Why did you decide to become an engineer?
Well, I was really more of a technical geek first. Like Les Nessman used to say on WKRP, it all started at this 5,000, no. I was literally 5 years old, and I discovered electricity. Now, Benjamin Franklin had done it before, but it was day kindergarten was done for the year, last day of school, and I started playing with batteries and light bulbs and wires and made a little telegraph key out of a piece of tin can lid or something and made just a simple DC circuit. And I thought, well, that was fascinating. And then later on in Cub Scouts, there was a project to build a crystal set that was in the Wolf Handbook, and so it was interesting. So I built a crystal set, got it to work. Of course, I lived in a town that only had one station, a kilowatt AM that was signed off at 7 p.m., so couldn't always get anything on it, but you know, it worked. Then I decided I got interested in amateur radio, got my ham license at age 12, and so by the time I went to work at my first radio station in my hometown, the same one I listened to on the crystal set, just board hopping basically, football games and signing on Sunday morning and that kind of thing. $1.60 an hour, by the way, big money, 1968. And so it was, I wasn't really that interested in being on the air, but then later on, when I bombed out of calculus in college, I thought, I'm just going to go do radio because I really like it. So I got finished up my first class license, which I was working on, went to work nights at directional AMs because you had to have a first to work at a directional AM, and became a top 40 rock and roll disc jockey. I had several air names. I was Jack Stevens, Bill Jackson, Chuck Winston, the Boogeyman for a while. So did that, and then it dawned on me after dealing with a number of these, you know, smaller or medium-sized stations that program directors and management and so forth, they were just difficult to deal with or impulsive or whatever. So I thought, you know, I think engineering is a lot more secure, and now I have enough experience. By that time I was at 5 stations, I think. And so in Colorado Springs, I picked up 2 FM stations just on a part-time contract basis. Started, you know, as chief engineer at these 2 stations while working at a TV station full-time. And then I had the opportunity to go to Denver. And it was a much bigger operation, much better run, and then eventually to San Francisco. And then, you know, over the years, it's been 35 or so stations.
Nice. So Dan, what's your story? How did you, what was the draw for you to become an engineer?
Well, first of all, I'd like to introduce my wife, Lynn. We met at KSRO in Santa Rosa, and we are celebrating our 50th anniversary on August 7th.
Wow. So, yeah. Over 60, over 50. I've been married over 40 years. Bill, how many years for you and Siobhan?
32 or 3.
32 or 3? Oh, you've got a few years to go yet. So, yeah, we're hearing of some radio romances, which is great. But, and maybe part of the reason for the success of these marriages is because you were engineers and you weren't a radio gypsy moving all over the country. But,
well, she knew what she was getting into, you know, since we were working in the same place. But, anyway, so the start for me really was my love of music. And so I'd listen to music till dawn every night. I was a bit of an insomniac. And that helped me later on when I had to work overnight in a transmitter site, cleaning it or, you know, making it work reliably. Anyway, the first at KPFA, I had gone to live near Los Altos there, and there was a station that was being built in Los Altos. So I thought, well, gee, this is pretty neat. I'll go down there and see what I can do. Maybe I can sweep the floor or something like that. It was owned by William Green, and it was at 97.7 in Los Altos at 242 State Street. And so I met Mr. Green, and he didn't want anything to do with me. He said, he was sort of like a W.C. Fields guy. He had a big cigar, and he says, "Go away, kid, you bother me." So I went on my way, and I thought, well, I'm going to do something here. So my mother lived in Berkeley on Rose Street, and so I went up there and stayed with her, and I rode the bus over to the Pacifica station, and volunteered there because I had my FCC license. and I couldn't drive. I was only 14. So they had me taking transmitter readings, and I was operating the board, big old RCA board, and engineering a acoustic music show on Saturday night called Midnight Express, I think it was. But anyway, that's where I got my foot in the door finally, since Mr. Green didn't want anything to do with me. And then somehow along the line, I went to a remote broadcast for Radio Keene in San Jose. And I thought, gee, you know, I could do this. I wasn't old enough to drive still, but they were going to pay me $1 an hour to set up the mics and, you know, for Red Merle and his country gentleman on Radio Keene, and do the remote broadcast, because their regular engineer didn't want to do it. It was a Saturday, and he was working all week. And so, yeah, that was $1 an hour I got for that. Big money. But I was happy to do it, enjoyed it. And a little later on, when I was in high school, they called me up and said, you know, we got this FM station, Keene FM. And it's in the basement of the Dienza Hotel in San Jose. And, you know, we know that you can, you know, play the music and read the commercials and also all that sort of stuff. I was kind of nervous about that. But George Sells and Ray Hollingsworth, he says, listen, kid, it's FM, nobody's listening. So I did that through high school. I was on from midnight on Friday night till 8 a.m. on Saturday morning, and then from midnight Saturday night till 8 a.m. on Sunday morning. And then we had some remote broadcasts that we did there. And eventually I did that also for Radio Keene at the AM out in the orchard. Because nobody wanted that shift on Sunday morning. So anyway, just things continued to progress. Ended up in Armed Forces Radio in Vietnam. Had a show on every night on the network from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m., dedication request show. The only 50,000 watt station I'll ever be on. But it covered all Asia, and I got dedications and requests from Australia and New Zealand and everywhere in the Asian area.
And you didn't have anybody firing at you?
Well, they tried to blow up the site, in fact.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a hostile work environment, to say the least. Yeah. But anyway, it goes on and on from there. But
nice.
Anyway, we need to move on.
Yeah, so, and 97.7 FM in Los Altos, didn't that become KFOG's South Bay signal at some point, Bill Ruck?
It moved about 5 times.
Oh, okay, but
Since then.
yeah. So, yeah, Bill Ruck, what drew you to become a...
So Peter, you want me to explain my long path to perdition then?
Yes.
I want to start off the wall, but I want to quote our good friend and fellow engineer, Ellis Feinstein. And Ellis would say, I'm a broadcast engineer, but don't tell my mother. She thinks I'm a piano player in a whorehouse. So that gives you the perspective, but actually, I tried to get my high school to put a radio station on the air, and that never went anywhere. So my first on-air was at KALX at UC Berkeley. And I also quickly found out I was not very good on the air, but that kind of sort of impacted my, my college education, so I ended up going in the Navy for a while. And then gradually wormed my way into the business. And it turns out that when I got out of the Navy, I went to work at KALW and ended up teaching at John O'Connell School. My father volunteered for KALW in the late 40s. So I'm second generation at KALW. So I guess it kind of came that way. And then various things went downhill from there.
Very good. Well, I want to get some good war stories here today. And oftentimes when the weather goes wild, that's when the station gets knocked off the air. And it's the engineer who has to go to the transmitter site in this crazy weather and get the station back on the air. So I want to find out from each of you the wildest weather or conditions, or maybe if you were working when Loma Prieta hit, that might be a good story as well. I think we'll go the other direction this time. So Bill, the craziest conditions you ever had to deal with?
I was very lucky because KFOG is at Sutro Tower, and you can take Muni to Sutro. So there's no issues about snowplows and anything else getting to Sutro Tower. So I've never really had that experience, but you've mentioned the '89 earthquake, okay? So this is my earthquake story. KNBR was the giant station in 1989. And the week before then was complete lunacy at the station with all the special things we were doing for doing that. And since that was the Bay Bridge World Series, I was working very closely with my friend Kevin Mostyn at KYA, which was the Oakland A's station, coordinating things, doing everything else. And so finally, the station gave me a pair of tickets because everybody got a pair of tickets. Well, I hate baseball. So I gave the pair of tickets to my wife, and she and a friend went to the game. And I said, I'll stay at the studio. Probably don't need to do anything, but I'll stay at the studio. So I was in the engineering shop at KNBR with my feet up on the desk talking with my colleague Norm Phillips at down in Dallas, one of the other Susquehanna stations, when everything went like that. And I go, oh, Norm, an earthquake. And then the real one hit, the lights went out, and I said, Norm, earthquake, gotta go, and hung up the phone. Ran into the control room, power would come back on again, we had a generator, and the board operator was going, what do I do that? And I said, turn on the candlestick module. And so he put it on, and the engineer there is Lee Jones. And Lee was smart enough to have a battery-operated M67, so he was back talking and everything else, and then proceeded to spend the night doing all sorts of other interesting things. But Norm then called corporate and said, they just had an earthquake in San Francisco. The vice president of engineering, Charlie, turned on the TV set, and all they had was pictures of San Francisco in flames and the Bay Bridge down, and he was sure they had lost in San Francisco. But we stayed on the air, at least KNBR stayed on the air, KFOG stayed on the air until the UPS died and we lost the studio power. I then, got them kind of working, and there's a long bunch of stories, but that's the only scary part of the whole business. But now, going to the transmitter site, those of us that in this Bay Area, we don't have to worry about snow and all those kinds of problems. I've heard some great stories about getting to a site in the middle of the winter. But for a while I worked for then KMPX on top of Mount Beacon. Mount Beacon is the little towers just north of the Golden Gate Bridge above Sausalito. The thing about Beacon was you drive up to the top, but when the fog was in, you're driving through very thick fog because it would bump against the inversion layer and get very thick. It got so thick, the only way you could find your way on the road, because you couldn't see the road in front of the car, you'd open the driver's side door and look for the grass strip along the edge of the cliff and use that to guide yourself going up the road until you made the last U-turn. And at that point, you would, in like 10 feet, you go from 1 foot visibility to clear blue sky. And you drive up to Mount Beacon Park. Well, the thing is, from Mount Beacon, you're above the inversion layer. And so between Mount Beacon and Mount San Bruno, it was clear and flat and smooth. It looked like you could walk all the way over to Mount Beacon because you're above the inversion layer.
Wow. Wow. Dan, any crazy getting to the transmitter and wild weather stories?
Well, I guess the thing where they dropping mortars in on us in Vietnam, they knew that there was something important at the base of that tower that had the flashing lights on it so that the helicopters wouldn't run into it. But yeah, we had some pretty close calls, so that was very nerve-wracking, to say the least. But other things that had to do with small market radio was relationships with program directors, it usually isn't the owner of the station that calls you, it's the program director, and they're on the phone every 10 minutes to find out when you're going to get it back on the air. Well, my reply was, well, it certainly won't be before I hang up this phone.
That was a good rejoinder. Now, Chuck, you and I both worked in Colorado. I remember one time the station I was at was knocked off the air by a windstorm, and our poor engineer, I think the gusts got up to 110 miles per hour, and he was up there. Is your wildest story from Colorado, or is it something out here?
Well, there's both. There's here or there. Is this mic on?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can hear him, right? Yeah.
All right. Yeah, Colorado, the worst thing, I mean, it happened a lot there. It snowed. And then in the summertime, we had lightning almost every day. So the summertime, something would blow up. In the wintertime, you had snow. All right, so I'm at this one of these first two stations I'm chief engineer at in Colorado Springs. And one of the stations was on top of Cheyenne Mountain, where all the TVs are. And it's something like a Mount San Bruno or a Lookout Mountain in Denver, FMs and TVs. It's right above NORAD, which is inside the mountain. And it's 9,500 feet. Well, there was a snowstorm, transmitter goes off, there's no backup transmitter at this place. There was backup power because it was previously associated with a TV station and they actually shared the same building, so at least when the power went out, the TV generator took care of that. But the station's off the air, didn't know why. I had to borrow a four-wheel drive vehicle from the owner's son, and this thing was not in real good shape, and I got up to about a half mile from the top, and it got stuck, and now the snow was waist deep. It was, I mean, literally up almost to the windows, so I had to walk about a half mile through waist deep snow carrying my toolbox to this transmitter. Had no idea what was, and there were no spare parts, nothing. But at least it was warm in the TV transmitter building adjacent to it, so I knew it wasn't going to freeze if I could get there. and then another kind of semi-related thing, this was in Denver at Lookout Mountain. And this wasn't because the transmitter was off the air. I went there just on a normal routine weekly visit. There was maybe 18 inches of snow, so it wasn't too bad. And I got out of the four-wheel drive vehicle and I heard this hissing noise. Hissing noise. What is that? I go over to the building, and the building was on a hillside, so it kind of stuck out, and there was a crawl space underneath there, and a little door that was about that high, 2 or 3 feet high, and I heard this hissing in there, and it was continuous, so I opened the door, and I was greeted by a slab of ice about that thick. And the hissing was the water valve that fed the now defunct bathroom, but didn't know there was a water valve under there. The pipe had broken, and it was spewing water like this and then freezing. But the valve was visible. So the only remedy to this, before it brought the whole building down, was to crawl uphill over the ice to get to the valve, turn it off, and not freeze to it, and be stuck there. So I went back to the vehicle, turned the heat up, rev the engine, got as much heat as I could inside my coat, bundled up as warm as I could, and went in there and said, I got one shot at this, slid up there, and of course now because it's uphill, slide back on the ice. Finally got to the valve, got it shut off, and so that was a close call because nobody knew I was there, and there was no anything, I literally would have been stuck there till spring, spread out, frozen to this thing.
So the takeaway so far for aspiring engineers, you don't want to work where it snows or where there's a war going on, right? Terry, do you have any stories about any crazy weather that you had to deal with keeping this station on the air?
Well, one of my jobs was, you remember Sparta, Paul Gregg, and the Bauer transmitters. So, let's see, what was I going to say?
Bauer transmitters?
Yeah, 5000J.
There's still one over by the toll plaza.
Still using it.
No, but it's still there.
And one of the more exciting things I did was to go to Nicaragua and put the first and possibly last stereo FM station on the air. That was pretty exciting. The owner of the radio station opened the trunk, and he had filled with automatic weapons. And following out the dictator was, I think he was finally killed by a bomb in Florida somewhere. So that was exciting.
I'll say.
And there was I think it was ABC News reporter that was shot, and he had the room next to me in the Intercontinental Hotel.
I know as a reporter in the 80s, I was sent to Nicaragua for a couple of weeks when the Contras and Sandinistas were going at it. And the way I looked at it, neither side wanted to kill an American reporter, so I figured I was probably okay. But it's a little bit crazy when there are weapons around, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
I want to ask you all next about any boneheaded moves by an air personality. Accidental, of course, but I was told in the early part of my career, if you've got water in the studio or any beverage, only fill the cup like half full. So if you spill it, it won't do as much damage. But I want to hear about any stories where they didn't mean to do it, but the air personality maybe made your life a lot more difficult by doing something like spilling a cup of coffee into the console or something like that. Terry, you worked with Don Sherwood, right?
That's
Back
right.
in the day.
Yeah.
Well, I won't call him out. Well, all right. Did he ever do anything stupid to you?
No, actually, quite the contrary. He was a very good person. He had a lot of wives. But
A lot of wives and a pet tiger or something, or a puma or something. Yeah. Your wife was telling me, though, at Halloween, he would send home Halloween candy for your kids. Right?
well, that's right. He did. No, he was actually a very good person, I think. And I can remember the days when he would tell everybody to blow their horn. And they did. But Carter Smith was another, actually a really, really good guy.
Carter B. Smith, yeah, good person.
Just a prince trapped in the body of a radio announcer.
Well, these were good. These are good stories, but the juicy ones are where the person has major attitude and they do something stupid. But it doesn't sound like you have any stories like that.
Not really. Most of the people that I worked with were okay.
Yeah. Well, I think your wife would tell us that your husband was probably pretty easy to work with too, right? Yeah, of course the idea is to keep calm when the station's off the air and all hell is breaking loose and you have program directors calling you every 5 minutes. But yeah, Chuck, how about you? Do you have any stories about somebody that, maybe spilled cotton, knocked out the console by accident?
Yeah, it was no more than just the normal routine spill into a console. We've all dealt with many of those, or several if you're lucky. But this particular day, this was there again in Denver, KIMN. Somebody had spilled into the control room console, and some module had blown out or something like that. Well, right across the hall was the production room. It had the same exact console. So I thought, well, I'm going to go steal a module from the production room and put it in the control room so we can get back on the air. And those consoles were fickle in a way that you couldn't change anything hot, or you would just cause major blowouts. So you had to turn everything off, switch the module, turn it back on. Okay, we did that, got back on the air after some dead air. Now then I take the bad module over to the production room and start working on it and troubleshooting it. trying to work around the production guy as best as possible. So at times I had to wait. It wasn't the troubleshooting that was so much the problem, but I was just a little bit nervous that day anyhow, because this was the day I was planning to leave early to meet the parents of my fiancée for the very first time. We were having dinner at one of my fiancée's aunts, and I'm going to meet them. So I was just apprehensive to begin with, and this problem was worse than expected. And then while I was there, the production guy says, you know, this MCI reel-to-reel machine here, it does this weird thing. You look into that. So I got the module going, and I thought, well, okay, I got a little bit of time. Let's see what it is. Started digging into that. Now that I'm about an hour late to dinner, I'm nervous. I'm going through, it's rush hour. I get there, and I'm meeting the parents, which is bad enough. And, you know, everything went okay, but it was a nerve-wracking day. We're still married 44 years later.
Well, and at least they knew you were gainfully employed, right?
Yes, yes.
So Dan, how about you? Any stories along these lines?
Well, I think one of the things in broadcasting that we had to deal with in the 60s and 70s was it was a time where everybody smoked. And that stuff got into everything.
Yeah.
I know one time I went over and visited at KSFO, and the acoustic tiles on the wall were not white. You know, so I guess this smoking and the ash and all of that, you know.
I'm curious, what would that do to the equipment?
Well, it wasn't good for me to breathe, but
Yeah.
past that, it got into everything,
Yeah.
you know, the ash.
Messed with it.
Coca-Cola and cigarette ashes make a nice 100 ohm resistor.
See, that's an engineering joke. Bill Ruck, you were going to tell the Bill Kafuri story?
Is Bill in the audience? Good. So a little bit of background. KFOG got changed from elevator music to rock and roll. And to do that, we had to put turntables back in the control room, which is a little closet at Girardelli Square, Control Room A. So we had two turntables, and we were playing records, LPs, right? It was just before CDs became available. And so one night I had just a wonderful time with a lady friend, and I'm not snuggled up next to her at about midnight, and the phone rings. And it's Bill saying, Bill, I'm really sorry. I'm not having a good time here. I spilled coffee into the turntable, and it's running about 100 RPM. And those are SP10 turntables, for those of you that remember those turntables. And I said, oh, okay. So I untangled myself from my lady friend, put on my clothes, drove down to the transmitter, or down to the studios. And when you're playing records, you can't play segue between one record turntable, you know. And so I started taking it apart, and Bill said, well, anything I can do? And I said, well, Bill, get the newspaper, look under one ad and see if there's any positions available for an announcer. He didn't appreciate that. So I spent the rest of the night pouring the coffee out of the SP10, cleaning it up, and finally around 3 o'clock in the morning, I realized it was not going to be an easy fix. So I drove over to KUSF, which had SP10s, in one of their rooms, took out the SP10, drove back to Girardelli Square, and somewhere around 6 or 7 in the morning, they had two turntables again. So, and just for the record, I like Bill Kafuri. He's a really nice guy. I enjoyed working with him, but it kind of ruined our relationship for a while.
Well, I've got a quick beam down a turntable story. My first radio job in high school was in Santa Maria. Yeah, two turntables, and there's a Commander's Cody song that starts out, my pappy said, son, you're gonna drive me to drinking if you don't stop driving that hot rod Lincoln. So I hit that song and it goes, my pappy said, son, you're gonna drive me. And the turntable stopped. So I call the engineer, well, first I'm desperate, I gotta put something on the air. And there was a movie that had just come out, and they had just put out a soundtrack album, and I thought, oh, cool, we'll be cutting edge. It was a double album to a movie of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band that like featured Steve Martin doing Maxwell's Silver Hammer and the Bee Gees. Anyway, the upshot was it was a horrible album, and I didn't know that. I said, well, now we're going to treat you, but it did buy me time while our engineer came down and fixed the turntable. Yeah.
There is this may be urban legend, but there has been a story for years, a 70s vintage story of a rock and roll station in Los Angeles where the console had a problem. The engineer went in and removed the module, and he inhaled so much of the white dust that had been spilled into the console, he had to be hospitalized.
By the way, we are at one point going to open it up to questions, or if you have any good stories to tell, we'll have you share those as well. I want to ask you all next about maybe one of your proudest moments, or something where you went all MacGyver. Maybe something gave out and then the backup gave out and you had to jerry-rig something and somehow you pulled it off and got it on the air. And again, it's a moment of pride in your career that maybe sticks out for you. Bill, we'll start with you.
Okay, background information. I was contract engineer for KMPX in the mid-70s. And at that time, KMPX was owned by an estate. And it was a messy estate, and the lawyers were trying to sort it out so they could sell the station. But in the meantime, the lawyers that ran it would not put one penny into improving it, but they would pay any amount of money to fix it. And so there were a lot of problems, and the more it broke, the more money I made. So I wasn't really complaining, but the transmitter was a BTF 10D up on Mount Beacon, and it had all kinds of problems. And of course they wouldn't pay any money to PM it. I would just patch it up and put another 4CX250. But anyway, one day my pager goes off, calls the station, and they're all in panic because the station's off the air. So I called the transmitter, and at that time, KDFC was manned. They had a guy up there playing back the classical music off the tapes. And I said, hey, would you mind going and hit the reset button and see what happens? Long pause, guys. And I said, well, Bill, I did. There was a bright flash and a bang, and that was it. Okay. So I get in my car, drive all the way up there, and I'm getting there and hit the reset button, flash, bang. Oh, shit. So about that time, as I'm beginning to dive into it, the phone rings. I answer the phone. It's the station manager. Well, that manager and I did not get along well for a lot of reasons, including me. But mainly, I was the last contract engineer they had because everybody else had quit because they couldn't deal with him. And one of the things about him is that he was tall and he was used to intimidating people. Well, I'm 6'4", so he couldn't intimidate me. In fact, just to piss him off, I would call him Shorty. Anyway, he said, you were off the air. And I said, yeah, I know that. Well, what's the problem? And I said, well, I just got here. Something's overloaded, bright flash and a bang. I don't know what to do. And he said, well, how long will we be off the air? I said, a lot longer if I keep answering stupid questions. And I hung up the phone. Which did not improve my relationship, but I didn't care. And so that ended up being a problem with a bad connection on the B+ line that went through it was a piece of Teflon wire that went through the plate tank up to the tube, and for some reason the wire broke off at the lug going into the tube. So I was able to slide an extra ½ an inch of Teflon wire down through, back up, stripped it off the end, soldered it back onto the lug, and had it back on the air in about an hour. But again, I would have replaced it, except we weren't allowed to do that with KMPX, but I did get the transmitter back on the air.
Nice. Sounds like you had a bad connection, literally and figuratively, with the station manager there.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing a common thread when the PD or the manager calls and says, how soon are you going to have us back on the air? Well, a lot sooner if you'll get off the phone. Dan, you got a good jerry-rigging story for us?
Yeah, well, several, but I'll just keep it to one. When I got out of the Army, because I was drafted, there was a provision that you had to be rehired if you got drafted. And so as soon as I got out, George Snell says, okay, welcome back. We don't have anything for you here in San Jose, but you can go to Las Vegas. Well, Las Vegas is a kind of lonely town if you don't know anybody, and they don't want to know you until you're there at least 8 months or maybe more. So I did time in Las Vegas there taking care of their stations for George Snell and Floyd Farr, and then came back to San Jose. So I was looking for something to do after that, and I noticed that KLIV was getting ready to go to 5,000 watts and work with Altown, and then also over at KLOK, they wanted to go to 50,000 watts, and so I got in touch with Herm Stahlberg, who was the chief at that time, and he says, yeah, come on down here, kid, we'll give you something to do. And so anyway, we put together, they hadn't built the new building yet, so they were still in the old building. And the first thing that I ran into was I was taking readings. The control room was right across the window from where the transmitter was. And I was in there taking readings, and Sean O'Callahan is reading some script copy on the mic, and there was one of these big Western Electric mics that's like the birdcage, 639B, I think it was.
Altec 639.
Yeah, and so it was suspended on some kind of rubbery thing, maybe bungee cords or something like that. And the thing, I'm looking at the transmitter, taking the readings, and I hear this, and I turn around, and Sean is down on the deck like this, talking into the microphone, trying to read the copy, because the bungee cord let loose. So a little bit later on, the new RCA Ampliphase transmitter arrives, but the new building's not ready for it yet. They're just doing the foundation. So they got it like a 1 or 2 car garage temporary thing put behind the existing old building at KLOK. And so we bring the 4 modules in, put them together. They're on pallets, and then we got the phaser over here. And so it was my job after we put that together was to sit there and babysit the transmitter, because there was no remote control for it, and they couldn't. Well, it was brand new and everything like that. So I'm working away. I think I was building a Heath kit or something on the workbench, and I turned around and I smelled something burning. I couldn't figure out, what is that smell? That doesn't sound encouraging. And there are flames coming out of the top of the phaser next to the RCA Ampliphase. And I says, the thing's on fire. So I hit plates off on the 50 kilowatt RCA Ampliphase and went over there and took the fire extinguisher, thank God we had one, and put out the flames. But the matching unit for the common point, which was like a little over 40 amps of RF, had shorted out, and the bakelite around it had caught on fire, and there was soot all over the place. So, I went back into the other building, put the 10 kilowatt transmitter back on the air, came back in, and cleaned it up as best I could, and took a piece of copper strap and strapped around the sample for the common point current feed, and got it back on the air.
Nice. Chuck, any creative solutions that you employed to a problem?
Well, yes, and actually I was able to hand this one off to a former assistant, and they're all related. This happened It starts off with Lookout Mountain in Denver, and a lot of my stories come from there because it was a bit more challenging there in many ways. But in any event, we had a pair of Harris FM20 transmitters combined, so it was 30-some thousand watts. And I made acquaintance with Jack Sellmeyer, who was involved with the design of that transmitter, and these were not well-built transmitters made by Gates and Harris. And he said, oh yeah, those things. He says, well, no science was employed in the design of these transmitters. So that was number one. Well, anyhow, one of the problems that it had was that, because there were two transmitters side by side running at the same time, so at least they were essentially doing comparable things, and you could kind of compare meter readings and so forth. And so one day, one transmitter fails, and I'm not sure what's wrong. Well, you have to almost lay down upside down to see this thing. The driver compartment is upside down underneath the final tube. So I open that up and I see this resistor that's in there, and it's all burned up and flaky. Well, it's just a resistor that feeds the screen voltage. I believe it was the screen voltage to the final tube, so there's no output. It's a small carbon resistor, if you're familiar with that, 22 ohms, 2 watts. All right, replace that. Now it works fine. All right, great. Now that it's a couple years down the road, I have a former assistant who's gone to another station, and they have an FM20. Same transmitter. This was not on the mountain. It actually was close to where I lived. It was in the middle of a golf course and next to a cemetery in just an urban area. And he said, I've been working on this thing all day. He says, I've been here for 12 hours, and I just can't figure out what's going on with this. He says, it's just, he says, you have any ideas? So I said, well, show me. And I recognized it immediately. So I said, take that little compartment, that cover off of that. And he took it off there, and without looking, I reached in and I pulled out the ashes of that resistor. I was there about 10 minutes. And so he says, well, what do we owe you? And I said, bottle of whiskey. And then here in San Francisco, this was KYLD, Mount San Bruno. 1:30 in the morning, thereabouts, transmitter goes off the air. And of course, by now, we have sophisticated remote control. We can kind of see what's going on. And so I thought, this seems very similar. Different brand transmitter, Broadcast Electronics, 20 or 30,000 watt transmitter that's at Mount San Bruno, wild. And so I said, this just feels like that's what it is. And that transmitter was fairly new. Same thing, there's a door you take and look under there, and sure enough, there's a resistor that's broken in two. Not because it's burned up, but because the blower is running to the tube, and the thing is like this, shaking a little bit, and it finally fell apart. Well, I didn't have one. It was a 10 watt, 10 ohm resistor, but we had a lot of parts over in the KMEL and K101 building. And I went over there and looked, and I didn't find a 10 watt, 10 ohm resistor. I found a 25 ohm, 25 watt resistor, but it was one of those adjustable ones with a slider on it. So I very carefully adjusted it to where it read 10 ohms, hung it under there as carefully as I could, hoping that the blower didn't bash it into the chassis or something. Turned it on, and it worked, and it ran that way for about a year until I replaced it, and then I bought several of them, pre-made the leads to the exact bend they needed and lugs, and that way the spare was immediately there. It would take you 10 minutes to replace it. And I'm sure the spares, some of them are still up there.
Nice. Terry, do you recall any incidents where you came to the rescue and saved the day and came up with some creative solution to a problem?
Oh, yeah, I can remember rectifiers exploding, mercury vapor. We had a RCA BTA 10F, which was, if you were not careful and didn't warm the rectifiers up before you turned the switch on, they did nasty things. They'd blow up in sparks and everything. So there was a lot of that. Well, it's very interesting. I've heard a lot of stories. I think everybody can share in common the emotions that go along with having these technical problems.
Well, and hearing you guys talk about fires and explosions, it's like you deserved hazard pay, I think.
I have a little fire story.
I was going to say, I think everybody has coffee stories.
Yeah, well, oh yeah, coffee and the board. Yeah, you almost have to come up with a game plan for when that happens. You've got another fire?
This is a fire story, yes. This is more recently, there again, Mount San Bruno, KYLD. I was up there one day. It was just a nice day like this, and I just pulled into the parking lot there, and as I pulled in, there was a kind of a flash, and I look over, and there's a power line that runs from where the power comes up Mount San Bruno over to the various buildings, and I see flames and sparks and everything on top of this power pole. It wasn't a transformer or anything, it just was, it caught on fire. And by this time, iHeart had developed a very onerous monitoring system back in Cincinnati. Anything that happened would alert them immediately, create an alarm. They had a ticket system and so forth. But in any event, here's the flames, and I'm hearing generators kick on. It's like, okay, the power's out here, and generators are kicking on. My phone rings. It's this monitoring station in Cincinnati. What's going on? I said, well, there's a power failure. I said, it just happened. There's flames over here. Well, how long is it going to take? I said, it's going to take as long as it takes for the fire department to get here once I call them and the power company. Well, we need to put something down here. I said, why don't I get back to you on that? Let's put out the fire first. What do you think, guy? And their orders were to make sure they had something to put in their records immediately. And I said, there's a fire on the power line. So I went and checked the generators. We had 3 stations there at the time. And the generators were running. Everything was okay in that regard. Called the power company, called the fire department, and they came and dealt with it. But it was one of those situations like the general manager or the program director stories. They want to know what's going on while it's still happening. And what are you going to do about it? How long will it take? And so it was one of those situations where there was a fire and explosion for the only reason was poor power line maintenance and rust.
I guess I can understand like program directors and general managers, you know, time is money or however you want to put it. They're like, oh my God, you know, they're seeing all the spots that they're having to reschedule or whatever. But I'm glad to hear you guys did not suffer fools gladly and that you had your retorts for when that would happen. We're going to open it up to questions soon as a way to kind of start bringing this segment to a close. You know, it sounds like about the roughest part of your job, aside from, you know, having to deal with fires and explosions, was dealing with people being demanding as to when are you going to get us back on the air. To kind of wrap up this portion, though, I want to hear a little bit from each of you on what you have enjoyed most about your career. Hopefully we all have a career that, you know, by and large, we enjoy what we do for a living and we get through it. One of my favorite memories when I worked with Bill was picturing him one time on the 10th floor balcony on Hawthorne Street, where KFOG was, holding a microphone out as the Cal Berkeley marching band played down in the street ahead of the big game. And I thought, this guy's great. He's got a great job. But hopefully you guys have enjoyed what you've done for a living. And I guess I want to sum up here by getting your thoughts about what, you know, you've all done this for many years at this point, what you have enjoyed most about it. Was it solving a problem? Was it the nice people that you encountered, or, you know, being the hero, getting the station back on the air? And Terry, I guess I'll start with you. All the years that you worked as an engineer, what did you like most about the job?
Oh boy, that's a tough question. There were so many things I liked about it. But when you I was thinking about coffee, and Bill Weaver, do you remember who he was, anyone?
KLOK.
They had a station at Santa Ana, the golf course. And one of the announcers spilled coffee in the console, and Bill Weaver came to me and he said, "You got to go down there and fix it." So I got in my car, drove there as quickly as I could, and when I got there, I cleaned it up and it worked again. And then it was time to go home. And it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. And I was driving up 101. And suddenly there was a lightning strike on a tree, right? And I think I might have been involved in a fatal accident. But it woke me up and I kept going. So there was, when you stop and try to think about all these things that happened to us, and many things did, that was one of the more dramatic ones. I think working for KDSC for a while, I went and the transmitter was off, and they had these mercury vapor rectifiers in the transmitter, and they were hanging. They weren't in a socket. Do you remember that? Anyone else? For a long time, they were just hanging. They were suspended by the wires that were connected to them. But anyway, it's good to see all of you people.
Well, and one thing I'd like to bring up, having talked to your wife earlier, being an engineer has allowed you to carve out this life where you guys got married. You bought a house in San Jose that you've owned, what, like 60 years now?
Yeah,
You've been
we
in
still
the
live
same.
there, yeah.
No, all right, we were talking about this, and I don't want to be nosy, but can I ask how much you paid for your San Jose home?
$28,950.
Okay, yeah, a round of applause for that. Yeah, so yeah, I think you could get a little bit, for a house in San Jose, a little bit more than $28,000 for it now. But it'll, your work allowed you to have a wonderful life with your wife and raise kids and have the house there in San Jose. So I think that's pretty cool.
Well, we did have a wonderful life, and my wonderful wife has been more than wonderful. And she's still being wonderful.
I enjoyed talking to her earlier. And because you were an engineer as opposed to being an on-air personality, you didn't have to be a radio gypsy moving all over the country. It was fairly stable, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I did have a program. I was on the air for a while. It's called Terry's Turntable Terrace.
I like the alliteration on that. What station was this on?
KLOK.
Okay, nice. There's a poster in the back room. What did it say? KLOK? KLOK loves you. Yeah, and it's a nice poster back there. She got a kick out of seeing that. Chuck, what have you enjoyed most about a career as an engineer in radio?
Well, a couple of different aspects of it. I think mainly project completion, when you get something done. Build a studio facility or redo a transmitter site or put in a transmitter or whatever it might be, that while it's going on, it's interesting work and you're accomplishing something each day, but then when it's finished, that's the best thing. When it's finished and it works, and then you'll get a little bit of credit from management or staff or whatnot. Hey, this is great, this is wonderful. And so that's, I think, even if I'm by myself at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's like, okay, this is done and it works. Now I can rest. So that's part of it. The other part was actually benefits because you work hard. When I designed and built a big studio facility in Denver, And when it was all done, the general manager, who was just a wonderful guy, said, "What would you like for your trouble?" And you know, we worked on this thing for well over a year. I said, "I want to go to Europe for 6 weeks." He said, "Well, here's the phone number for our travel agent. We'll have him set it up and pay for it."
Wow.
So that was one. And then I came out here, and it was a little tighter. But one thing that we did here when I was working with KISQ, with KISS, and Rennell, you know, a lot of you probably know Rennell, had a thing where we would have a contest, and we'd take people to Hawaii. Listeners, we take the first one, we took 40 couples. Everybody got a hotel room, nice resort. Everybody got a rental car. That was the first one. I ended up going out there 9 times for free, doing 8 remotes on 3 different islands. And so it was, you know, again, we're dealing with a phone company. They're on Hawaii time. Their urgency is a little different than ours. And so I learned that you need to go there a week ahead, maybe 8 or 9 days ahead, because the phone company has this thing about a due date there that doesn't, it's just like, yeah, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, you know, we'll see, you know, the whole relax, whatever the Hawaiian thing. Hang loose, you know, and it's like, I need this tomorrow. Oh, we'll get it. Well, the closest one was 20 minutes before airtime to get it to work. But anyhow, it was a lot of free trips at a lot of nice resorts. So I really enjoyed that part of the job.
Yeah, I could see that. Dan, how about you? What have you enjoyed most about being an engineer? Any stories you want to share?
Well, for me, you know, it kind of grew out of amateur radio. Got licensed originally when I was 10, and I enjoyed the technical part of it, and because I really enjoyed music and, you know, tried to get as close to sources of that as possible, I just found a way to turn what I would have done for free into a career, and I've never worked a day in my life.
That's something we all shoot for, I think. Yeah, no, I can relate. Sometimes I'm like, God, I'm getting paid to be on the radio. You know, with me, it's on air as opposed to engineering. But Bill Ruck, let's have you bring it on home.
I'll say that I'm really good at twisting wires together, and completing a project is really great. But in my mind, the best part, with one exception, was the air staff I got to work with. You and Dave Morey and Frank Dill and everybody else at all the radio stations. That really was the best part of working there, is the collaboration and all the creative people and everything that kind of came together. So that was really what made it the most fun, and it's the biggest thing that I missed. Now, there are parts that I don't miss at all, but I definitely miss working with you and people like you.
Right back at you. Before we open it up to questions, could we have a round of applause for our panel? Since I've got the wireless mic, I think it's probably easiest for me to work the room. Does anybody have a question? If so, I'll bring the microphone to you. If not, we'll just enjoy some snacks. We've got a question over here. Give me a second. And just talk right into the mic.
Bill, 1996, San Bruno Mountain, the KSAN tower blew over. Were you involved with KSAN at the time?
KSAN tower, no, I wasn't involved in that one.
1077, 2 towers blew over on the same morning, December of 1996. One was on Mount Diablo.
Well, that was the Mount Diablo Tower, which is another really long story of towers that should not have fallen down, but they did.
There is snow on Mount Diablo, by the way, I can tell you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, that's the Mount Diablo story is a pretty long and involved story.
Well, give us the condensed version.
Huh?
Give us the condensed version.
Skipping over all the history, Mount Diablo had this tower on South Peak. And everybody I talked to said the tower was overloaded, and it really was overloaded and poorly, and it had lots of problems, but we built a booster up there for most of the FM stations. And everything was great until it came down one day. And then we went through a whole bunch of temporary towers and a new tower and everything else. But when, and actually at that time Raul was working for me, and we drove up to Mount San Bruno in the middle of the storm. And here's the tower laying across the building going down the hill. And one of the antenna mounts went through the top of the shipping container we were using and went through the top of the KFOG rack and went in and destroyed a bunch of equipment that was coming through there. That was really not my funnest moment there, the Mount Diablo Tower. But one of the side stories is when the new tower was built, the owner said, got a quote for a new tower, and he said, okay, that's a nice quote, but I want you to make the legs bigger. And the tower fabricator said, well, it won't make any difference. And he said, no, I'm paying for this. Every tower I've had that failed in the first 20 feet, so I want you to make the first 20-foot section bigger. And he said, well, I'm paying for it. Okay, fine. And so that's why the Mount Diablo Tower, the first 20 feet is a 10-inch diameter leg going to an 8-inch diameter beyond that, because the owner insisted that he wanted a bigger leg on the first 20 feet.
Sounds like Mount Diablo Tower was aptly named.
Oh, yeah.
The Devil Tower. Any other questions here? Okay.
I would like Dan to tell us a little bit about his time at KFRC with another broadcast legend, Phil Lurza.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Which I missed that. Which broadcast legend?
Yeah, that'd be, Phil Lurza was the chief engineer for a long, long time. In fact, there was a period of time, am I? No?
Oh,
Anyway.
Steve, is his mic up?
Yeah, okay, for a period of time, late in Phil's career, he was the general manager because RKO was in a situation where they were eventually had to sell all their stations, but that's another story. Phil and I went to Los Altos High School together. He was 2 years ahead of me, and we got to know each other a little bit at that time, except that I was an underclassman, so anyway. Later on, I ran into Phil at one of the Bay Area broadcasters' luncheons and expressed interest in, seeing what I could do to maybe come south from Santa Rosa and work in San Francisco. So he kept that in mind, and eventually they were getting ready to move from their studios on Bush Street over to Washington Street, and they needed more people to help. And so I was able to go to KFRC.
Is fellow engineers that you've worked with over the years, and I've heard terms coming out today that only engineers might understand. Is it like a band of brothers in some ways? Obviously, this is a panel of men, but
yeah, I think it's a pretty small community and getting smaller, unfortunately, but. It's one of those things where you go to different stations and the atmosphere is a little different, it's a different culture. Certainly, maybe the budgets are entirely different. Budget was never an issue for KFRC. They had a lot of resources, and it was quite a innovative organization when it came to coming up with an idea. It was never a question of what anything cost, it was how soon can we do it.
Well, any of our other panelists, have you enjoyed do you enjoy talking shop with other engineers?
Yeah.
That's all we would do in the shops, or
Yeah.
when we get together, run into whoever at at the transmitter site, like Mount San Bruno, since there's so many stations there, you'd run into somebody almost every day that you would go up there, at least during business hours, middle of the night, maybe not so much. But we have a lot in common. We're all on call, we're all dealing with the same type of equipment, we're all dealing with the same landlord and whatever problems.
And
there might be.
station managers who are demanding you get back on the air.
Yeah, all of that stuff. The other thing is, and it varies from market to market. I learned this, Chuck Bullitt and I were talking about that. You know, he recently retired and moved back to Maine. But when he first arrived, he came from Washington, D.C., and he was a little uptight at first. And I said, no, it's just very laid back here. I said, everybody's got keys to everybody's transmitter, and if you need parts, just, you know, you just go get it and let, you know, guy, hey, I went into your site and I borrowed something. Okay, fine. And he says, oh, in D.C., they would just sooner put a bullet through your feed line than talk to you. And I said, no, it's not that way here. And after a while, he became very relaxed, and it was like, wow, you guys, other engineers are actually nice.
I like hearing that Bay Area engineers are a friendly
It's very
bunch.
laid back.
Yeah, Bill?
Well, there's a long story about this. Around 1970-ish, Howie Imicus at KCBS and a couple others got together and started having regular lunches that became known as BABES, Bay Area Broadcast Engineers, and they would get together for a regular luncheon once a month at the Fior d'Italia for a long time. And then that became gradually Dick Parks, who retired from KGO Radio, became the exact salesman, and so he took over the BABES thing. And they regularly issued a piece of paper that had station numbers, studio transmitter numbers, and home phone numbers for all the broadcast engineers. Yeah. We all knew each other. We all knew that if it was 4 o'clock in the morning and I needed to go next door, I could call up Chuck and say, hey, can I mooch you something or another? And Chuck would say, sure. Or I need some help, can you come up? We all worked together against the same evil management of our radio station, but it has always been very social in the Bay Area, and I really honor Howie Imicus for actually starting that whole culture of working together.
Well, I'm so glad this came up. We've learned something here. I didn't know that. I think, did we have another question here?
Yeah, I'm a newbie here. I moved here 10 years ago from Atlanta, but I grew up in St. Louis and got my chops at the University of Missouri, several jobs and so forth. But I did start off with a crystal radio set from the Cub Scout Handbook, which I thought it was the Bear book, but you said it was the Wolf book. Close enough.
I never made it to Bear, so it must have been the Wolf book.
Yeah, so you didn't make it to Weeblos like I did.
Oh, no.
So this big station to listen to back there in the 60s was KMOX, CBS O&O, just like
Did you ever build a
KCBS here.
crystal set with a Quaker Oats?
With the what? It was a roll of toilet paper with wires on it.
Easy for a form.
Yeah, you had the wrap hook. Yeah.
So I grew up listening to Cardinal baseball at night, 50 kilowatt Omni. It really worked quite well. And listening to Harry Carey and Jack Buck in the 1960s, multiple World Series Cardinals, was quite a fan. And after that, I was going to the University of Missouri through electrical engineering. There was an AM/FM in town for $1 an hour. I was also on the student station there. And so in front of a Gates Yard console, I actually had an afternoon shift, and occasionally they carried Cardinal baseball in Rolla, Missouri. And it was a thrill to be manning that board and hear the words, "Hello, everybody. This is Harry Carey. It's time for Cardinal baseball." And of course, him and Jack Buck were Hall of Fame announcers too.
Along those lines of being a board op when something important was going on, I board op during the Apollo 11 landing. And so I was listening to it and had a little black and white TV about that big. And so that was a momentous thing to be, still in high school and the moon landing was going on and you're at least connected to the media coverage of it in some way.
I remember working morning drive in Colorado and driving in at 4 in the morning, being able to pick up Chicago stations, I think WLS or whatever. Were you the kind of guys that would lie in bed at night trying to hear how far away you could hear a station?
Oh, yeah.
WLS, yeah, you bet. Yeah.
I was on the air on KGO one night. I was there for 3 years and later got a letter from Sweden that they had heard me in Sweden, which I thought was pretty cool. We've got another question here toward the back.
Just so you guys can see me. One thing that I want to mention, I may be one of the younger people. I have a relationship with everyone on that dais. Bill Ruck knew me before I was born and gave me my first job in media and radio. One thing that I just really want to make sure is said, not only do I respect all of you, it's amazing where this group of people, literally the countless people that your work has touched and inspired. Terry, your work that you've done with especially non-English speaking stations. Pick a different language that is not English, and Terry has been involved in just about every station in this market, if not the West Coast. Chuck, I know you've done a lot of work and volunteer work and using your amateur expertise and that history into commercial, non-commercial radio. Dan, yourself, not only did you have a stellar commercial career, what you've done in the religious market and all that stuff should not go not unsaid. And Bill, I can't say enough about what you've done in the commercial market and alternative radio with KUSF and currently with the LP stations in the market. Peter, we've got to work together on the commercial level, all successful. But what you've done and what you have volunteered throughout your careers is very inspiring. It's inspiring to me and many other people that I don't know and that you guys don't know. So I just want to say thank you, and I appreciate all your efforts in putting up with my act.
Yeah, absolutely. A round of applause. And people are bringing up points that I should have asked questions about earlier. So Terry, you having worked with non-English speaking broadcasters, I mean, was engineering the common language, or how did that work?
Well, there were some that I worked with that were actually engineers. When I worked for KLBS in Los Banos, one of the announcers had been with the Portuguese engineering. I wanted to say too that one person I've not heard mentioned in our meeting today is Howie Imicus and Babes.
Who is that?
Howie.
Howie.
Yeah. Howie, you remember the episode with the nude woman?
Okay, let's hear this story. The episode with the nude woman.
Well, all of the big executives from New York were here. They went out to the transmitter site, and Howie was having the towers painted.
Oh.
And
Oh, yeah.
Is this a Harry Hobaugh?
Harry Hobaugh.
Yeah, okay. Harry the Hawk.
Harry the Hawk.
Yeah, all of his girlfriends, they were into clothing optional.
I understand that Harry died after he fell out of a fruit tree. Is that story true?
Fell out of a fruit truck?
Well, a lot of things
No,
happened
fruit
with
tree.
Harry.
Fruit tree.
Fruit tree.
I think the less we know about that, the better, perhaps. Now, Bill Ruck, you had wanted to add something?
Well, I want to make another off-the-wall comment, but a very good friend of mine is Don Lincoln, and Don's second wife was a widow, but she was also married to an engineer, and Mary Liz wanted to start a support group for wives of engineers. And when I mentioned to my mother, she said, "I'll join." So I think it is somewhat of a challenge to be married to an engineer. But the other half of the story is my wife was in between jobs and got a call from a headhunter saying, you got to call these people up. So she called the person up, had an usual conversation with everything else. Finally, the question came to, can you work with engineers? And Siobhan said, I'm married to one. And the person she was talking said, you're hired. The previous person in that could not deal with the local engineers, but my wife works for a special engineering company, and our favorite person at work is a geotechnical engineer. So you think we're into arcane, this is the guy that specializes in dirt and rocks.
I don't know if this is fair to ask, but Mrs. Lloyd, could I ask you, have you talk a little bit about what it's been like being married to an engineer for 60 years?
Well, my husband, I can't remember now, who talked about getting phone calls at midnight. He would get calls when the engineer couldn't get the transmitter to come on. So we didn't ever sleep in.
You get that call at 5 a.m.
Oh, yeah, or 4 in the morning.
Yeah, a lot of them.
No.
Yeah.
That's a different relationship.
Good. Yeah.
I would like to say one more thing, though. Because my husband was very sharing with our grandchildren, I have a granddaughter who loved all of the things. He gave one of them a test tube, and they took it to school, and it was just amazing. Great big tube, huge. At any rate, she's gone on now to college and is very interested in engineering, so I thought that was nice.
That's awesome. Are any of you seeing more women in the profession in recent years, or is it still guys who are in?
In my past life, I taught broadcast engineering at John McConnell School, and we would get a handful, 4 or 5 women every year, and many of them ended up staying in the business and working there. I mean, I had Bonnie Hong working for me.
Oh yeah, I remember Bonnie.
And before, remember Bonnie?
Yeah.
And, so, yes, they're rare, but I think it's a lot easier now. I think part of the problem was that when we were growing up, girls were not expected to know which end of a screwdriver to hold on to. And I think that has changed, and so I think there's more and more possible things for women to get involved in. But women engineers in 1960 were really, really scarce. I think they're fairly common now.
Yeah. Do we have any other questions here, or are we? Oh, okay, Dana. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to ask the panel. I found myself in my career, I always loved engineers because, as a content guy, you guys were my distribution. If I didn't have the distribution, I wouldn't have an audience. So, I really appreciate all the work you've done. But my question is, in your career, have you gone through any kind of a disagreement with management as far as FCC rules, like they want more coverage, or a program director who wants to be the loudest sound on the dial, but the processing is so bad that it hurts the ears?
Well,
You must remember Angelo Diddy.
What was that, Terry?
Angelo Diddy, FCC.
Was he your enforcer, or the guy that?
Well, he visited me several times. I can remember my son was being born, and he came to inspect me at KLOK. And I guess none of you remember Angelo, but he was well known at the time, terrorized everybody. Went to KFAX and closed the door too quickly on the transmitter to see if the interlocks worked, and blew up all of the rectifiers.
Oh, no.
So anyway, there are lots of things I've been thinking about that I was going to say that I haven't said. But it's a pleasure being with all of you.
Well, we appreciate having you here today.
We have a lot in common.
Yeah, and Dana's question is an intriguing one. Have you ever had anybody that said, can you, like the Spinal Tap, I want it to go to 11.
One of the managers that I worked for was Knowles Hall, and he was the most incompetent person I've ever seen. And at that time, KFOG was beautiful music, elevator music, and it was not making a whole lot of money. And so Noel's job was to improve the profitability of the station. So I got called in to look over the budget. And, this and this, and then, okay, well, gee, we got to pay a lot of rent to Sutro Tower. Okay, we can't do that. Oh, well, the next biggest thing on the budget was the power bill. And Noel said, well, Bill, what can we do to reduce the power? And I said, well, we could run the transmitter at half power. And Noel said, yeah, we could do that. I would save $10,000, whatever it was. He said, no, wait a minute, if we do that, cable will be all over us. He forgot that the FCC rules mean that we have to operate at 50% power, but Knowles actively considered running the station at half power in violation of FCC rules to save money.
We won't get into other incompetent managers or anything like that, but yeah, I think we've got another question over here. By the way, I love the Sutro Tower cap. Where'd you get that?
I've got a lot of equipment up there over the years.
Oh, there you go.
Thank you.
Terry, I appreciated your comments about Don Sherwood. I could recall listening to his programs in the morning before going to school. Any of the KSFO guys have any Jazzbo Collins recollections?
Any of you work with Jazzbo?
I worked with him at 300 Broadway.
Okay, well, let's you can, yeah.
I just remember the Purple Grotto. I just remember the Purple Grotto. He was on, I think, gosh, it was maybe 9 o'clock or something at night. He went on the air, but yeah, Jazzbo was quite the personality.
Yeah, I remember seeing him backstage at the Blues Festival, and he was an interesting guy. Yeah. Any other questions here, or are we about ready to wind it up? It's been an interesting talk, and we appreciate the gentleman here spending time with us today. So I guess if we could have one more round of applause. And I'd like to turn it over to Steve Cushman so that he can promote anything regarding the California, CHRS that may be coming up.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you to all our engineering panel, and thank you to all of our guests who came to hear them today. We like doing this because it gives people an opportunity who generally don't know some more information about how radio works, used to work, and maybe still will work in the future. But it's good to have these, and like I say, we haven't had anything like this in almost 20 years, and so it's good to catch up again. Be sure to come to Radio Day, July 18th. It's going to be a lot of fun. And then August 15th, we're going to have another day like this, but it will be featuring Lee Hammer. And Lee Hammer is going to come out here and talk to us about sports broadcasting. So that's going to be on August 15th. Be sure to come for that. And when we know about June, we'll let you know. Keep after our newsletter, keep after our website, and I hope you like what CHRS is becoming and what we've done for radio history. Thanks everyone for coming, and drive safely.